Today's video is for all of us out there who live in a cluttered, messy home, yet somehow have been able to completely avoid addressing it and maybe even have become blind to it. We're going to talk about how and why this can happen, and of course, talk about effective solutions that can help us make positive changes in this area, no matter how hopeless or helpless we may feel about this aspect of our life. But first, if you're new here, my name's Nena. I help people to declutter their minds and their homes using practical applications of psychology. So if this is an area where you feel like you may need a little more support, please take a moment to subscribe. This channel is dedicated to finding real solutions for those of us who feel defeated and overwhelmed by clutter. And today we're going to be doing exactly that. So we all know that clutter greatly impacts our mental health, but I wanted to talk about a specific relationship that I rarely see discussed, yet oftentimes very negatively affects our life, and that is the relationship between clutter and escapism or avoidance. It's actually a very interesting phenomenon with a lot more going on beneath the surface than we may realize, because really it's a two-way street that can begin to create an unending cycle that can feel impossible to pull out of. But I think when we're able to make these personal connections, it can not only lead to a lot more self-understanding, but it can also make it easier to address both sides of the issue. So I'm going to start by talking about what's really going on in this relationship, and you can see if it rings any bells for you. And if so, again, don't worry, we will be talking about solutions. And if not, I would go ahead and check out the complete playlist on the psychology of clutter and disorganization. I will go ahead and link it down in the description box below, because you will probably be able to find the root cause that makes a little more sense for you. But this is one that I have found to be a lot more common than we may think. So just so we're on the same page, I want to go ahead and give you my definitions for what we'll be talking about today. So by clutter, I'm simply talking about the things that we have accumulated in our home that we don't really love or we don't really need, yet we feel the need to hold on to for some reason, even when they cause negative consequences, and even when this clutter is really holding us back by taking up needless physical or mental space. Now, the term escapism is a concept that comes from psychology, and it refers to the tendency to seek distraction and relief from unpleasant realities, especially by seeking entertainment or engaging in fantasy. And this is a topic that I have an entire playlist dedicated to, and I will go ahead and link that down in the description box below, so you have these resources. But I want to quickly mention that escapism is not always unhealthy. In fact, in moderation, it can be necessary and even quite beneficial. So in this case, we're really talking about excessive escapism and even avoidance, which brings us to our next term, avoidance behaviors. Now, these are also actions used to distract or escape difficult situations, feelings, or thoughts, but they are habitual and often used as mechanisms to try to permanently avoid addressing or facing issues or feelings. And if and when escapism becomes avoidance, it can start to cause even further difficulties in our life and cause complications in our decision making, in our motivation, and even in our overall well-being. So now that we're on the same page, let's go ahead and talk about this two-way street. So firstly, we know through research that clutter can trigger avoidance tendencies, such as scrolling endlessly through social media, or binge eating junk food, or watching Netflix for hours and hours. I think we have all been there. But it makes perfect sense, because we also know that clutter can contribute to anxiety, depression, and stress. In fact, clutter raises the level of the stress hormone cortisol, which has been shown in study after study after study. It can also affect how we feel about ourselves. Clutter really affects our self-esteem. It can also feel like it's giving us very negative messages, like we aren't good enough, that we're not capable, that we're not responsible, that we are a failure, or that we can't get our life together, which of course, is not true, but these are the types of toxic messages that we can really be receiving from this clutter. So it's natural that we would want to avoid these messages and these thoughts because we feel like it kind of gives us a temporary sense of relief. But unfortunately, it starts to create what's called an avoidance cycle, where this type of behavior becomes reinforced. Now, this is another topic that I do have an entire video dedicated to. It's called the avoidance anxiety cycle. I will go ahead and link that down in the description box below so you have that resource as well. And it's something that we really do need to understand because it is an incredibly short-sighted solution, because it actually increases our anxiety and it increases our stress level. And it can also really make us lose confidence in our own ability to cope with problems and to come up with solutions. So in short, on this side of the spectrum, clutter begins the cycle of escapism or avoidance. But the reverse can also happen. Sometimes our escapism tendencies initially had nothing to do with clutter. Maybe we were trying to avoid different unpleasant aspects of our life. Maybe we simply have other difficulties or challenges in our life that we feel that we can't really deal with or we're not really ready to address. So we have adopted this habit of avoidance. For many people, it can almost start to become a way of life where we are engaging so often in this fantasy world or in our different escapism activities that it can become more appealing to us. We want to spend more time there than in our real life, and we start to really slack in areas of our life that really should be important. It can begin to affect our mental health, our relationships, our work life, our studies, and of course, our ability to maintain our home. We can become completely blind to clutter. We don't think about it, and we certainly don't even care about it anymore because we are far more invested in our escapism activities. That's where we feel safe, that's where we feel comfortable, and that's where really we start to focus all of our attention. So on this side of the spectrum, it's actually escapism and avoidance that starts the cycle that leads to clutter. So it doesn't really matter which side of the street you enter the cycle from. Once we are in it, clutter and avoidance will continuously get reinforced. And the longer we allow these behaviors to continue, the more difficult it can feel to change them. But the good news is that we can, in fact, change them. And having awareness of the issue is really the first step of the process. Acknowledging that this is what is going on is going to help us be able to finally address the problem. So we can begin this process by figuring out which side of the street we are on. So did our issue begin by feeling overwhelmed and defeated by clutter? Or did our escapism or avoidance tendencies result in that buildup of clutter? So if clutter and mess are the root of the issue, we will find that taking action, even if it's a very, very small action, will start to pull us out of the cycle. So simply put, when we stop using avoidance, we will find that we start gaining control of our life again. Now, I know a lot of you out there may be thinking, well, if I could do that, then I wouldn't be here in the first place. I wouldn't be watching this video. And I do understand, but I want you to know that this is an area that you can change no matter how hopeless or helpless you feel, no matter how many times you've tried to address this issue. And I'm going to link down 2 specific videos that will walk you through the process of changing this area of your life completely. It's not a magic wand, but it does work. These are solutions that are realistic, non-threatening, and that are addressed in a very compassionate way, because I know what it's like to feel overwhelmed and to feel like this is something that we can't fix. But in reality, this is something that we can change when we approach it the right way. Now, if you feel that it's actually your escapism habits and your avoidance tendencies that have led to clutter and disorganization, there are also many strategies that we can use. Like I said before, I have an entire playlist on this topic, and the specific video, How to Break Escapism Addiction, will walk you through a very thorough process in doing so. This is also an area that we don't have to feel hopeless or helpless in. But basically what we need to do in this process is to identify what we are trying to avoid and why, really acknowledging the negative impact that the avoidance has on our life, learning to reduce the actual avoidance behavior, and also learning healthier coping mechanisms. And for either side of the issue, we can also use helpful techniques like mindful meditation, observing and questioning our thoughts, and journaling to gain self-awareness. All these things are going to help us make significant changes in our life. And also, many people find that finding support through friends, family, or even a licensed mental health professional can really help with this process as well and be incredibly beneficial. So I am so curious to hear if this relationship between clutter and avoidance is maybe something that you can relate to. If so, please take a moment to say hello in the comments and feel free to share your experience if you are comfortable doing so. As always, I truly hope you found today's video to be insightful and helpful. If you did, please like it, share it, and definitely become a subscriber if you are not one already. We absolutely want you to stay connected, and I truly hope the rest of your day is extraordinary.